Your next reading is Basics of Portfolio Planning and Construction, end of chapter questions, and question number 1. Which of the following is least? Mind the word least. Which of the following is least important as a reason for a written investment policy statement? The IPS may be required by the regulations. That may be true in many jurisdictions. Having a written IPS is a part of best practice for a portfolio manager. This is true as well. But having a written IPS ensures the client's risk and return objectives can be achieved. This is not a guarantee. That is not possible. Having an IPS is not an assurance that risk and return objectives will be achieved. This is not true, and hence the right answer. Next. Which of the following best describes the underlying rationale for a written investment policy statement IPS? A written IPS communicates a plan for trying to achieve investment success. Appears to be a good option. Let's see the other one. A written IPS provides investment managers with a ready defense against client lawsuit. This is clearly not one of the underlying rationale. That's not correct. A written IPS allows investment managers to instruct clients about the proper use and purpose of investment. This is incorrect. It's not a tool to instruct clients as such. IPS basically is a tool of communication between clients and the managers so that they can mutually establish investment objectives and constraints. So that makes A to be the correct option. A was a written IPS communicates a plan for trying to achieve investment success. That is true. A written investment policy statement IPS is most likely to succeed if it is created by a software program to assure consistent quality. This is not true. Using a computer program to construct IPS is a ridiculous option. We may use softwares for portfolio construction, but not drawing up IPS. Incorrect. It is a collaborative effort of the client and the portfolio manager. That is true. As we just discussed in the previous question, that it's an instrument seen as a communication tool for the client and portfolio managers so that they can mutually establish investment objectives and constraints. So it involves more of collaboration. Then why not C? It reflects the investment philosophy of the portfolio manager. No, it doesn't contain the philosophy. That is somewhere inside the portfolio manager's head. Right? This is not true. Written IPS must incorporate full understanding of the client situation and requirements, not the manager's philosophy. So that makes B to be the correct option. Next, the section of investment policy statement that provides information about how a policy may be executed, including investment constraints, is best described as, that is, investment guidelines. Investment guidelines are described as section that provides information about how policy may be executed, including investment constraints, and so on and so forth. B. Why not A? Because investment objective section explains the client's objectives in investing, and the statement of duties and responsibilities that contains duties and responsibilities of the client, the custodian of the client's assets, and the investment managers, and so on and so forth. So that makes B to be the correct option. Next, which of the following is least likely to be placed in the appendices to the investment policy statement? Well, rebalancing policy and your strategic asset allocation, also known as the policy portfolio, they are contained in the appendices. Whereas the statement of duties and responsibilities, since they are very important part, an integral part of IPS, so they are likely to be not to be contained in appendices. So that makes C to be the correct option. Which of the following typical topics in an investment policy statement is most closely linked to the client's distinctive needs? Well, procedures are detailed steps to be taken to keep the IPS current, and the procedures to follow to respond to various circumstances. So this is not what we're looking for. Statement of duties and responsibilities. It contains all the duties and responsibilities of the client, the custodian of the client assets, the manager, the investment manager, and so forth and so on. This is not. Then it has to be investment guide. Yes. The section of an IPS that are most closely linked to the client's distinctive needs are those dealing with the investment objectives and constraints. And of course, that would be the investment guidelines, because they provide information about how the policy may be executed, including any constraints on investments made. So that makes B to be the correct option. An investment policy statement that includes a return objective of outperforming the FTSE 100 by 120 basis point is best characterized as having a relative return objective, absolute return objective, and arbitrage based return. Clearly it's a relative. This is the benchmark, and you have to go above 120 basis point than the return generated by FTSE. This is a relative return objective, because these are the returns based upon some index here. So the objective is best described as a relative return objective here. That makes A to be the correct option. Next. Risk assessment questionnaire for investment management clients are most useful in measuring value at risk. Absolutely no. How would you know this? Through questionnaires. Ability to take risk? No. Rather, we are interested to know the willingness of the client to take risks. That's willingness to take risk, not the ability. Maybe the client is very rich, but is he willing to? So that's what we want to determine, willingness to take risk, and that makes C to be the correct option. Which of the following best characterizes or is best characterized as a relative risk objective? Value at risk for the fund will not exceed 3 million. This is the absolute measure, not the right option. The fund will not lose more than 2.5 million euros in the coming 12 months. That's again a statement of maximum allowed absolute loss. It's an absolute risk objective. And the fund will not underperform DAX by more than 250 basis points. That is a relative risk objective, and hence that is our right answer. In preparing an investment policy statement, which of the following is most difficult to quantify? Most difficult to. Time horizon is pretty straightforward. Ability to accept risk, but willingness to accept risk, this is something hard. It's quite subjective. This is quite subjective. Ability to accept risk can be assessed through expected income, time horizon, existing wealth relative to liabilities, but willingness, how willing the client is to take risk, this is hard to quantify, and hence the right answer. Okay. After interviewing a client in order to prepare a written investment policy statement, you have established the following. Let us highlight the relevant. The client has earnings that vary dramatically between £30,000 and £70,000 depending on weather patterns in Britain. Okay. So it means the income is quite volatile. There is volatility in income. In 3 of the previous 5 years, the after-tax income of the client has been less than 20,000. The client's mother is dependent on her son, the client, for approximately £9,000 per year. The client's own subsistence needs are approximately 12,000, which leaves him in a very low availability of funds. The client has more than 10 years experience trading investments, including commodity, futures, stock options, and selling stock short. The client's response to the standard risk assessment questionnaire suggests that he has above average risk tolerance. Now, based upon this information, the client is best described as having low ability to take risk, correct, based upon his average income, volatility in income, and the dependency of his mother on him, and high willingness to take risk, correct, because here it says that he has been trading for the last 10 years, and it appears that he has above average risk tolerance, so which means the willingness to take risk. So look no further, A is the right answer. Next. After interviewing a client in order to prepare a written investment policy statement, you have established the following. The client has earnings exceeding 120,000 euros each year for past 5 years. She has no dependents. The client's subsistence needs are approximately 45,000, leaving sufficient cash for investment. The client states that she feels uncomfortable with her lack of understanding of security markets. So this is the problem. She is little uncomfortable. All of the client's current savings are invested in short-term securities guaranteed by an agency of our national government. So she's little risk averse. The client's responses to the standard risk assessment questionnaire suggest that she has low risk tolerance, as shown by her investment. The client is best described as having a low ability to take risk. Wrong. She has significant cash surplus or savings, but a high willingness to take risk. Not a willingness. She's not a risk seeker. She has low risk tolerance. A is incorrect. High ability to take risk. She has deeper pockets, but low willingness to take risk, as shown by the risk assessment questionnaire that showed that she has low risk tolerance. Look no further. B is the right answer. Question 13. A client who is 34 years old widow with 2 healthy young children aged 5 to 7, has asked you to help her form an investment policy statement. She has been employed as an administrative assistant in a bureau of her national government for the previous 12 years. She has 2 primary financial goals: her retirement and providing for the college education for her children. These are 2 primary financial goals. This client time horizon is best described as being long term. Sure, she's just 34 years old and she's worried about her retirements and of course the college education of her children who are just 5 and 7 years old now. So she clearly has a longer term time horizon. Okay, next is the right option. The timing of payouts for property and casualty insurers is unpredictable in comparison with timing of payouts for life insurance companies. Therefore, in general, property and casualty insurers have low liquidity needs. No, they have greater liquidity needs than life insurance because the timings of payouts are unpredictable. B, look no further. That's your right answer. Next, a client who is a director of a publicly listed corporation is required by law to refrain from trading the company's stock at certain points of the year when disclosures of financial results are pending. In preparing a written investment policy for this client, this restriction on trading is irrelevant. No, it is very much relevant. It should be included in the IPS, otherwise this gentleman, this director, might be booked under the insider's law and you will put his life in trouble. So that makes B to be the correct option. Consider the pairwise correlation of monthly returns of the following asset classes: Brazilian equities, East Asian equities, European equities, and US equities. We have been given their correlations. Brazilian with the East Asian 0.7, Brazilian with the Europeans 0.85, Brazilian with the US this. So they have been given this way: East Asian with Brazilian, East Asian with European, and East Asian with the US, and this, and this. Now, based solely on this information in the above table, which equity asset class is most sharply distinguished from the US equities? Now, since we are just interested in comparing US versus East Asian, European, and Brazilian, so our table that should be the concern to us is this one that is highlighted. Now look at this. The correlation between Brazilian equities and US equities 0.76, East Asian equities 0.88, and European 0.90. What does this tell us? The correlation between the US and Brazilian equities is 0.76, the lowest among these 3. So this lower correlation indicates that there is a greater degree of separation between the asset classes in the US and the Brazilian assets. So which means that if we construct an asset portfolio from these equities, so they will have a much sharper differences than the other East Asian and European. So that makes A to be the correct option. Next, Return on asset classes are best described as being a function of failure of arbitrage, exposure to the idiosyncratic risks of these asset classes, exposure to the sets of systematic factors relevant to those asset classes. Let us discuss these options one by one and then get our correct option. Regarding A, the failure of arbitrage. Now this is not correct. The return on asset classes, they are not the function of arbitrage or failure of arbitrage, correct? Exposure to the idiosyncratic risks. Idiosyncratic risks basically refers to the inherent factors that can negatively impact individual securities, or basically there are very specific risks to the asset which you call the unsystematic risk or or what you call the diversifiable risk. So returns on the assets are best described as being the function of exposure to the idiosyncratic risk. This is incorrect. The right option is that return on asset classes are best described as being a function of exposure to a set of systematic factors, and those systematic factors relevant to the asset classes in the portfolio. That makes C to be the correct option. In defining asset classes as part of the strategic asset allocation decision, pairwise correlation within the asset classes should generally be, first of all, asset classes should contain homogeneous assets. Like if you have an asset class A, B, C, so we should have identical assets in asset class A and B and C. Asset classes should contain homogeneous assets. Paired correlations between these securities in the same class, they would be high within the same asset class, but they should be lower. The correlation between the asset classes, different asset classes, should be lower, and that makes higher than correlations among the asset classes. That makes C to be the correct option. That is, the correlation within the securities in the class would be higher, and the correlation between these two asset classes should be lower, and that makes C to be the correct option, as just discussed a little while ago. Then we have probably the last question. Tactical asset allocation is best described as attempt to exploit arbitrage possibilities among asset classes. That is not tactical. Tactical asset allocation is best described as the decision to deliberately deviate from the policy of portfolio to generate some short-term returns, or to take advantage of temporary dislocations from the market conditions. So that makes B to be the correct option. Why not C? Selecting asset classes with the desired exposure to sources of systematic risk in an investment portfolio. That would be your strategic asset allocation. So that makes B to be the correct option, and it ends your basics of portfolio planning and construction.